Welcome to the very first episode on the Fanspeak Network. Fanspeak Network is going to have a ton of great football shows for you, but of course, we're going to start with the NFL draft because that's our baby. So, this is the very first episode of On the Clock with Steve Shoup. And of course, I'm joined by Steve Shoup, who is my brother, and he is the co creator of fanspeak.com with me and the creator of the On the Clock mock draft simulator, which hopefully you guys all know and love. So, Steve, I know how much you love the NFL draft because I'm your sister, but tell us, when did you start being obsessed with the NFL draft?
I was obsessed. I've been long cursed to be a Washington football fan with the pain of the last 30 years, but with their last Super Bowl, they ended up having the fourth pick in the draft the next year, and just the idea of that and the hype surrounding the selection of Desmond Howard, I just fell in love with watching the draft every year. When I was in college, I went with one of my college roommates to the '04 and '05 draft, saw the
That's
first
right.
rounds, saw
We saw you on
uh,
TV.
yeah, saw the Eli Rivers
Oh,
situation,
that's right.
Rodgers in the green room the next year. So it was two very interesting years.
Yeah, you got
Uh,
2 good years. Yeah.
but I just always loved it, and I love. I think even with free agency, I think the draft is still the best way to an efficient way to build a franchise and build a team. And I just always love the process.
Yeah. And I'd like to remind people that that was 30 years ago, that the pain that we have felt for 30 years since we've experienced the Super Bowl, but that's when the draft love started. Now, true or false, did I used to tape, you used to tape the draft year after year, correct?
I
Like
would
VHS
just
stop, VHS
Uh,
tape.
yeah, good old back in the day of VHS, and when the first round would take 8 hours, and it'd be on ESPN and then ESPN2, and
Right. It was always on
so
all day Saturday, right?
Saturday and Sunday, yeah, all
Okay.
day. But Sunday was ESPN2, so yeah, I would tape all that and just yeah, rarely ever rewatched it, but just in case I missed anything, I could rewind. I mean, I stopped doing that with the invention of the internet and the fact that you could easily go see what a pick was, um, uh, you know, um, stuff like that. But that changed. But yeah, it was just something I always loved and always enjoyed watching and reading about and studying these players and studying these guys because I think there is a science to the draft. I think it's always evolving and changing, but I think, we're here to talk about the Senior Bowl today, and the Senior Bowl is one of the biggest parts of that science of how you can find a good, strong draft class and build your team up. And um, you know, I, it just became a natural love and progression for me to just follow the draft and really try and study it from all angles.
Yeah, and we're going to get into the Senior Bowl. And before we do, I'd like to apologize to you because I'm pretty sure I taped over multiple of your draft VHSs with friends. True or false?
Absolutely true.
Yeah, I had to see if Ross and Rachel got together. But we are here to talk about the Senior Bowl today. The Senior Bowl week and has just recapped, or the Senior Bowl week has just wrapped up. We just watched the Senior Bowl game. So we're here to recap the 2022 Senior Bowl. And Steve had covered the Senior Bowl for, geez, what is it? Oh, about nine years. We haven't been the last couple of years just with everything going on, but he had covered it for 9 years. So tell me just the importance of Senior Bowl week. And I think it's more than what fans just see on NFL Network or ESPN.
Yeah, and thank goodness that we do have practice coverage
Right.
and the game as well, because that's one way I've still been able to watch it these past couple of years with everything going on. But um, it for teams, it's much beyond what happens in the game and what happens in the practice, which is even more important than the game. Um, it's three parts for the Senior Bowl. It's the on the field stuff, practice, again, outweighing the game. And it's not just the reps that you see, but they do a lot of the similar drills that you see to try and get a feel for guys, quickness, flipping the hips, things like that, cornerback drills, offensive linemen, how they bend, things like that. All the things you see next month at the combine, they do variations of here for these guys at the
Right.
starts of practices. So that's a part of it as well. But then the other two parts are the the interviews with the teams. The 100+ guys who are down here this week, every team got to interview them. That's something that does not, and sometimes multiple times. There's a formal interview, and then there can be informal interviews on top of that. So, that's something you don't see at the combine. You have a lot of number of guys you can see at the combine, interview at the combine. You can get some informal interviews of other guys, but I mean, your time's just limited. There's over 350, guys at the combine every year, and you have 32 teams trying to get them in a limited window. They're only there for a couple days. So it becomes really tough to interview everyone at the combine. Here, you actually get the chance to interview everyone. So that's a big factor. And then finally, the measurements slash medical. It's not as intense as the combine measurements and medical, but you begin to get a look at that. And so it's one thing you can work on. If everyone has a clean bill of health here and matches all the measurables you're expecting, then that's not stuff you need to follow up with later on at the combine or at a player's pro day or things like that. So a lot of it is it's a huge time saver. You get 100+ guys here together, and you can just get it all done during this week. So that means at the combine, you can use your interview allotment time. You might go back and re-interview somebody if you really like them. But now you can go find and spend that time on other players that you've not gotten the chance to see and talk to yet. So it's really big for NFL teams in a number of different ways.
Right. I know Jim Nagy, the director of the Senior Bowl, always uses the hashtag the draft starts in Mobile, and it really does kick off the draft process, right?
Yes,
For
it's
all the
just
reasons.
it's just a different than players' bowl games and their college season. It's just much different. They're getting NFL coaching. They're going to be in, for some of these quarterbacks, it's the first time, or not the first time, but one of the few times they've taken snaps from center.
Right.
There's just a lot of different nuances of, plays out of the I formation and two back sets and things of
Sure.
that nature. So different areas where people are lining up. I remember a couple of years ago, Sarah Richardson, he was an offensive guard tackle from Baylor, and because of their spread offense, he said the Senior Bowl was the first time since high school that he'd put his hand in the ground for a three-point
Wow.
stance. So, that's just a big thing, and so for a lot of these guys, they get to do different things, and we'll talk about some guys later. But um, I think you also have it from the other side where what a scheme was like Perrion Winfrey, defensive lineman from Oklahoma. Their scheme isn't a big penetrating scheme, and so he got the chance here to really just go all out and attack, attack, attack. And we saw that both in practice and in the game. He was extremely disruptive, far more disruptive than you consistently saw watching his games at Oklahoma, because they're just not asked to do that. So you allow some guys to be put in a better position for what they project to at the next level.
Right. And it's how they respond to the NFL coaching too, as throughout the week.
Yeah,
Right.
and you want to see them, uh, again,
Make
depending on positions,
adjustments.
but make adjustments, how they work with different guys, because they might have one or two teammates here, a handful of teammates. Some do, some don't have any, but they're working with all new guys. So you want to see the quarterbacks and receivers being on the same line, the offensive linemen working next to each other, especially when you're in full team drills and 7-on-7s, making sure they're picking up the right blocks and things of that nature. So yeah, it's a lot of that kind of stuff.
Okay. Now let's talk players. Let's talk quarterbacks first, because that's what everybody wants to talk about. So at this year's Senior Bowl, we have five big name quarterbacks with Kenny Pickett, Malik Willis, Carson Strong, Sam Howell, and Desmond Ritter. So tell me, in your opinion, kind of give me your thoughts on the five quarterbacks. If you want to rank them, just I'll let you kind of have the floor on the quarterbacks and how they did this week.
Yeah, so I think that's what's really unique about this year. We've definitely seen some years with some good, strong, a couple really good, strong quarterbacks. 18 had both Josh Allen and Baker Mayfield. Those are two top 10 picks right there. That's one, extremely good. A couple years ago, we saw Justin Herbert here, and we also saw Jordan Love and Jalen Hurts.
Mm-hmm.
But to get 5 of the 6 best quarterbacks in the draft, with Matt Corral being the other guy, who's definitely in the first round mix, and he might end up the top overall quarterback, especially on some teams' boards, depending on him how his medicals are. But to get those guys, because when you had Josh Allen and Baker Mayfield here, the next best one was like Mason Rudolph, and then after that it was a big drop off.
Right.
Same thing with the 3 I mentioned, Herbert, Love, and Jalen Hurts. I mean, after that, it was a big drop off. I think Will Grier was the next one. So, what's impressive here is you have all these guys competing against one another. And, I think going in, most people would say that Pickett was the top one. Next was probably either Willis, Howe, Ritter, Strong. I mean, you really have
Right.
people who are different camps for all these guys. And that's the thing. Like, none of these guys are that elite quarterback prospect, that guy who's going to go top 5 in the draft. And because of that, they all have a lot of positives, but they have a few holes in their game. And this could have been a separator if somebody really came out and dominated. I don't think anyone truly dominated. I honestly think you could kind of break it down into 3 groups. I think
Sure.
Kenny Pickett and Malik Willis both had good weeks and helped themselves overall. There were some missteps here and there, especially Pickett with the rain day on Wednesday. But, that gets a little overhyped. I mean, Willis, Ritter, everyone had some bad throws that day. Pickett, had a couple bad fumble exchanges, but again, he hasn't done a lot of
Right.
stuff from center. Um, so, but he really rebounded on Thursday's practice. He also had a good first practice according to all reports and accounts. And today, in his couple drives in the game, he looked good. Willis, same thing. Like Willis, I think really helped himself. He showed that tools wise, he's incredibly mobile, has just a cannon for an arm. Makes pretty, you know, good decisions overall. I mean, it's something you definitely need to see more growth out of him, need to see more consistent accuracy out of him. But I think he's a playmaker, and you're going to get some negatives, maybe some more negatives, but you're also going to get some more high upside plays. The big 60-yard touchdown pass or the big 30-yard scramble. So I think those two are the guys who kind of elevated themselves or ensured that they're in that mix for a mid to late first round, and probably, I think 2 of those guys, probably with Matt Corral, will be the top 3 quarterbacks taken. But I do think Sam Howell and Desmond Ritter both helped themselves a little bit. I think they showed that they're a step behind Willis and
Mm-hmm.
Pickett, but I thought they definitely had good games today. They had up and down practices again, like everyone,
Right.
but both I think flashed enough. I mean, Howe has mobility; he's got the arm strength. I think Ritter, definitely he's another mobile guy. But what I like about him is he's just smart. He processes well. You can just tell he's a leader. I mean, no shock there. He led Cincinnati, a group of 5 school, to the college football playoffs.
Right.
That's highly impressive. So I think those guys all definitely helped themselves. Carson Strong, I think a lot of people expected more out of him this week. He has had injury issues, and by all accounts, that's clear. But his combine medical is going to be highly important. But he was just very inconsistent. This has been the last 2 seasons like one of the most accurate quarterbacks in college football, and you just saw him struggle at times. And he actually is a guy who had a tight end and a receiver here, from college with him, so he had
Mm.
some familiarity with some of the
Yeah.
guys. But it wasn't all bad. He definitely still has a strong arm, and lack of mobility is there, but it was the lack of accuracy, I think, that really surprised people, and lack of consistency, because that was not him in college. I mean, he would put up big numbers and would get into a rhythm and groove and let his big arm work. And we just didn't see it. We didn't see it here. And he was probably much closer to Bailey Zappi, the sixth quarterback here, who
Mm,
in his own right is probably the seventh best quarterback in the draft class, and probably like a fourth round pick. Maybe sneaks into the end of the third round, just how many teams need young quarterbacks for the future or in backups. But that's the problem. Is I think Strong just looked much closer in line to that
right.
than the other two tiers that I mentioned.
Okay. Well, I mean, again, I know we are so early in the draft process, but after this Senior Bowl week, would you say that kind of what you characterize as that Pickett and Willis kind of made a case for being definite early first rounders, and then Howell and Ritter kind of more like second round guys, and then kind of a little farther back for Carson Strong. Did I kind of get that right? Would you say that's accurate assessment?
Yeah, I think
Again, long way to go in the process.
exactly. But I think Pickett and Willis, you know, I would say they're both top 20 picks. We'll see if anyone cracks the top 10
I mean,
this
this
year,
is one of the
just
weakest the
just
classes,
with the
QB
way it
classes in a
is.
while. Yeah.
And some of it is some of the teams, team like the Lions who need a quarterback, they're not taking 1 and 2. They have a pick
Right.
later in the first round. Maybe they move up some from that the Rams pick. We'll see if it's 31 or 32 next Sunday. Um, situations like that. You have Washington at 11. You have Pittsburgh. I think they're 19. Obviously, Tampa now could be in the quarterback
Sure.
market. The Saints are in the mid-teens. So you have those teams who definitely all are in the quarterback mix. You definitely have some top 10 teams who need a quarterback. The Panthers are definitely come to mind. A few others, but um, so maybe somebody ends up going in the top 10. Somebody falls in love. I mean, last year, you know, quarterbacks went high. I mean, Mac Jones was the fifth quarterback and he was taken 15th overall. So um, obviously there's not the hype surrounding a guy this year like Trevor Lawrence had, but guys like Zach Wilson came out of nowhere. I mean, Trey Lance with very little college experience because of the COVID year. They both went 2 and 3. So quarterbacks are going to get pushed up. But
Right.
I'd say Pickett and Willis are top 20 guys. I could see a Howe or a Ritter sneak into the end of the first round because again, we have these teams at the end of the first round who either desperately need a quarterback, like some of the teams I mentioned, or could use a young option. I mean,
Right.
there's a lot of teams who have guys gain up there in age, and the other thing you have is somebody in the second round could trade into the late
Right.
first round to get them. We definitely seen that multiple times before as well. Um, so I could see, probably one of Hal Ritter sneaking into the end of the first round, early second round, the other probably going fairly quick in that early second round. And then Strong still might get a nod in the second round, but he's going to need a big pro day, big combine if he wants to kind of maintain. He kind of came in with that mid to late second round range. Maybe he can hang on to that just because of desperation of what teams are need and looking for. But I do think he's going to have some work to do to catch up.
Okay. Well, now let's talk about just the offensive side of the ball that aren't quarterbacks. And you can talk about, speak to offensive line or skill position players on offense, but what guys should we be kind of listening for their name the rest of the draft season based on their performance Senior Bowl week?
So I think this is a couple years ago. You had the Evan Ingram and uh, uh, OJ Howard. They were both here and Gerald Everett was there that here this year. Uh, this is one of the more talented tight end groups that we've seen this year. I don't know if anyone will definitively be a first rounder, but we have Trey McBride, who is probably tight end 1 or 2 in most people's eyes. Isaiah Likely is another guy, top 4, top 5 tight end. Jeremy Ruckert from Ohio State. He's a guy who, given just how much receiver talent Ohio State has had these last couple of years, he's gotten very little use. He only had a little over 300 yards receiving this year in one of the more prolific college offenses. But he just, he just produces, and he would come up big in college, but it'd be, he'd get 2-3 targets a game. He had a nice week, got a little banged up, but he had a really nice week. Even going down further, guys like Jake Ferguson out of Wisconsin, Charlie Kohler out of Iowa State, good solid tight ends. Cole Turner, I mentioned, from Nevada, who's with Carson Strong. I mean, these guys are all going to get drafted in second, third, fourth rounds. And some might max out as tight end twos, but there'll be solid tight end twos. The Cameron Brates of the league and stuff like that. But guys who can step up if the tight end one's down, guys who can be an effective secondary option. But some of these guys, like I think McBride, likely especially, and I would not be surprised Ruckert as well. Jeremy Ruckert kind of reminds me a lot of like a Dalton Schultz. And I mean, speaking of a tight end too, I mean, the last 2 years, Blake Jarwin gets hurt, Dalton
Right.
Schultz steps up. He's had big years for Dallas. So, I think you're going to see a lot of guys in those mid rounds. Again, maybe McBride gets taken in the first round, but you're going to see 4 to 6 of these guys down here get taken in that second to fourth round range and be able to contribute early on. Receiver was not a very strong year. You have some interesting guys like Jalen Tolbert from South Alabama, Watson, North Dakota State, a few others who, were solid, looked good. It's maybe 1 or 2 sneak in the top 100 picks, but this is going to be a year where more receivers are like 4th, 5th, 6th rounders. Some
From
very
the
well
Senior Bowl.
from
There.
the Senior
Okay.
Bowl, yeah,
I
and
was
some
gonna say
very,
because Senior Bowl has had a lot of talented receivers. Someone who's going to be in the Super Bowl. Cooper Kupp was there
yeah,
in what
yeah,
16 or just some.
yeah,
I was looking back at old pictures that we had taken down at the Senior Bowl. Debo Samuel, Terry McLaurin, Cooper Kupp. I
yeah.
mean, you could name many others. I mean, there have been some major stud receivers there, and so you're basically saying not looking like that this year.
Well, I would also point like some of these guys, they could be it, but I just think they probably need a year or two. I mean, look at
Sure.
one of my, I think it was my second or third year down here, Marvin Jones. He was a 6th round pick. He ended up having and still in the league, but he's had a
Right.
very nice career.
Yeah.
Um, and so we could see this from a guy like Christian Watson, big 6'4" receiver from North Dakota State. But he went to North Dakota State. He probably needs a little time before he's going to make an impact. I think Romeo Dubs, the Nevada receiver with Carson Strong, big, fast, big play receiver. I could see him as a deep threat early as a rookie, but I don't think he's going to jump off the page and do it like Terry McLaurin did or Cooper Kupp did, and
Right.
just make an impact right away. And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. Offensive line came in a little better, a little bit more hype. Honestly, generally they got beat up pretty bad by the 2 defensive lines this week.
I read
This
that
is
on
not
Twitter. Yeah.
this is not necessarily a knock on the offensive line. I think there's some very good ones. Trevor Penning from Northern Iowa is going to be a 1st-round pick. Bernard Raymond from Michigan, very solid guy. Zion Johnson from Boston College, another guy who's going to be Daniel Falavo from Central Michigan. No, where's he from? It's going to
I don't
bug
know
me.
how you keep this all in your head.
He is. Oh
While
boy.
you're looking that up, I apologize for my dog. He would not leave my side today and decide to be the mascot. So this is Riggs. I'll try not to have him join us every show, but he's so cute and he'll pop his head up every now and then. Okay.
From Minnesota. I knew it was another Midwest school, but these are guys. Kennard from Kentucky. Like these are guys who are going to be 1 or 2 will probably pop into the end of the 1st round, but definitely 2nd-round talents. These are guys who could start early on. Abraham Lucas from Washington State's another one. But I don't know. Penning might be the only guy who ends up being an impact starter as a rookie. But some of the other ones I think are going to get drafted high and start. I actually really like the running back group that was down here. this
Okay, that was my
year.
next question. Yeah.
Um, again, this is not a couple years ago where Rashard Penny was first round pick. We've seen guys like Antonio Gibson get taken high, David Johnson. Uh, maybe somebody develops into that, but I think just a lot of solid guys. Tyler Batty from Missouri, short, stocky guy. You know, he just catches the ball well. I don't think he's a guy who's going to get 300 carries at the next level, but he's a guy you want in your backfield. He's going to make plays. He's got good vision, tough to bring down. Some people were comping him to Tariq Cohen. I see that. I also see a little Maurice Jones-Drew on the
Hmm.
higher upside. But just good, fun guy. I mean, had 1,600 yards rushing at Missouri. Just kind of an afterthought, uh, despite doing that in the SEC. But two other guys that really stood out to me: Rashard White from Arizona State. He's not a guy getting a ton of hype, but he is a playmaker, especially in the passing game. He had a couple nice runs today. Also, tried hurdling in a guy. He's done that plenty in college. He runs a little too tall, and I think that he needs to just learn to be a better runner. But boy, when he gets in the open field, whether it's on a run or through the air, he makes big plays, and that's what it's about. I think he's a guy who's going to be kind of a third down specialist, big play guy. Might even get involved some in the return game. So I don't think he's going to go in the top 100 picks, but fourth round, and he's your number two back who can be a passing game specialist. I absolutely think so. And then again, there's a lot of good backs here, but Abraham Smith from Baylor, another guy. Another guy had 1,600 yards plus rushing yards this year. Had a good game today, but he's just another guy who just runs tough, physical runner. Not easy to bring down. Also, like that, he got a couple passes thrown his way, dropped one today in the game, but he barely saw the football thrown to him at Baylor. So it was nice to see him get involved, not just today at the actual Senior Bowl, but throughout practice this week. Those passing drills were, I think, key for him because he needs to show that he has that element to his game.
Well, now let's jump to the defensive side of the ball because I think you covered the offensive, all the offensive positions incredibly well. Let's jump to the defensive side of the ball. I know I've read a lot on Twitter about the defensive line. Let's start there. Who are some defensive line prospects that really made a name for themselves this week and players we should watch?
Yeah. Well, the first one I mentioned earlier, he was making big plays in the game, big plays throughout practice. Wednesday's Rainfield practice, he was in the backfield pretty much every snap. But Perron Winfrey from Oklahoma, again, a guy who you'd see when you watch Oklahoma games, he'd flash every now and then, make a solid play, tackle for a loss or a pressure, but just wouldn't do it with any consistency. And some of that I think was scheme related. Some, just maybe just still learning and developing. But he really took to this week, this format. He's a just a havoc inside. I mean, he was okay against the run. I mean, you definitely want to see him a little better against the run, but boy, passing downs, he was just making play after play. So I really like him. Logan Hall from Houston, he came in about 12, 15 pounds heavier than his listed playing weight at Houston, which is good because he had to put on some weight. He can get after the quarterback a little bit, but he needed to put on more weight and still might need a little bit more to really hold up as maybe a three technique, probably more likely a five technique type guy. But I thought he was good. He looked good at the higher weight and still was able to be quite the threat. Myjai Sanders from Cincinnati, edge guy. He was very disruptive this week. Really good, quick first step. I like guys like that who can time up the snap really well. Sure, every now and then they'll get offsides, but he's got that first step quickness, and he was giving some of the best offense tackles here problems. One guy who played the first couple days of practice and kind of pulled out afterwards. And no surprises, Jermaine Johnson from Florida State. This is a Georgia transfer. Got the chance to now start at Florida State. Had 10, 12 sacks this year, and he followed it up and showed that there's no fluke. Like, it wasn't just him beating up on some couple bad ACC teams.
Right.
He can get after it, and he was absolutely bulldozing people and getting after the quarterback and living in the backfield on the first 2 days of practice. Those were a couple of the big ones. Another couple of big, more interior guys. Philindren Mathis from Alabama. I think he got a chance to show how he can just eat up Travis Jones, also from Connecticut. Both of them big, physical, interior tackles. Not going to rush the passer much, but just eat up blocks, stuff to run, get a little, push the pocket back, make a quarterback feel uncomfortable. They're never going to rack up big sack numbers or anything like that, but both of those guys I thought were really strong in that department. Another guy, this guy's more of a tweener, but D'Angelo Malone from Western Kentucky. He's too small to stay at an edge rusher, even in more of a 3-4 setting. So teams are going to have to get creative with him, but he gets after the quarterback. I mean, if you watch the game today, he made a couple really big plays. He did it throughout practice. He's a guy. He's like a good bullpen pass rusher. You call him. He's not going to be your starter. He's not going to be your every down guy, but he's going to come out and make a couple good pass rushes every game. Get after the quarterback, get some pressures, get some sacks. So it's a little tougher to figure out where he's best going to be drafted. He's going to have to show that he can, do some things in coverage and hold up against the run, is maybe more of a Sam backer. But really intriguing guy. I thought he had a good week for sure.
All right. How about guys in the secondary? Any players in the secondary we should really keep an eye out for, or be ready to hear their name as the draft season progresses?
Yeah, I think the best player down here in secondary was Roger McCreary from Auburn, and I think he came in as probably the best. There are a couple other good ones down here, but he came in as the best. I think left is the best. So I think he answered every question this week. Not blazing speed, but just smart, instinctive cover guy. Always around the football. Doesn't seem to get fooled a lot with receivers. So I think he's a guy probably going to be back half of the first round, early second round at worst, and he's probably a plug and play guy. You draft him and you can count on him to start as a rookie. Couple others that Tariq Woolen from UTSA. He's got a little bit more length, and he can get physical with bigger receivers. So I think he showed that, and I think teams obviously in the NFL need that type of corner as well. So I think those were two corners that really stood out. I think Petre, the safety from Baylor, was a guy who stood out to me, and I think he's probably the best safety from this group. I mean, there's, Joseph Kirby from Illinois had a good week. Secondary was good all around. Not a lot of standouts that I thought. A lot of guys who were solid. One guy who was a little up and down was Kobe Bryant from Cincinnati. Today in the game, you saw a couple times where he got a little lost, got a little grabby. I think got flagged one time, probably should have gotten flagged one or two other times. But some practices, he was shutting down guys. So you probably want to see a little bit more consistency, but he had a really good year for the Bearcats this year. And, good size, good speed. So I think he'll still get drafted pretty high, probably in the second, maybe early third round. I thought the corner and safety groups were pretty strong overall. Not major standouts. We've seen, in some years past, some guys just really fly up draft boards,
Right.
like a Kyle Duggar or Jeremy Chin or a few guys like that. But
Sure.
but I think the guys who you kind of expected to be top 100 picks played like it. I don't think they necessarily elevated their game to think that, oh, this guy is a late first rounder. He should be drafted in the top 10, top 15. But they did what they had to do, and that's all you can ask for sure.
Sure. Well, let's talk about besides quarterbacks, because we know that Pickett and Willis kind of stood out the most in the quarterback group. But one guy on offense, one guy on defense, who kind of made themselves the most money this week or kind of really stood out so much. And again, there are going to be guys that you've already named, but just one guy on each side of the ball that really stood out the most that is really going to kind of set themselves apart again as the draft season in Mobile and for going forward as the draft season progresses.
Well, I definitely named a number of guys on defense already, but one guy I didn't get to name because we kind of skipped over linebackers was Chad Muma from Wyoming.
Yeah, I saw you tweet about him today.
Yeah, not the deepest linebacker group down here, but I really liked him. He is a lot of the linebackers who are down here are tweeners. Either they're part edge, part outside linebacker, and you just hope you can find the right place for him, or they're
Right.
more safety and more of a coverage linebacker, and hope you can find the right place for him. But he's a true three down linebacker. Could play strong side, but I think he's a middle linebacker or an inside backer in a more of a 3-4, and he's going to stand. He should be able to stand the field as nickel. Good size, uh, good instincts. He chased down Malik Willis on
Mm-hmm.
a scramble and just really showed good range in that from where he was coming from to have to run down a guy like Willis, who's just an incredible athlete. But yeah, he can run with all the tight ends, run with the backs, can be physical, take on blockers, and then just you saw good instincts. I mean, he made a couple of really nice run stops today throughout the week of practice. I thought he was really good, and being a smaller school guy from Wyoming, he looked more the part. I mean, he was
Right.
extremely good throughout the week. So that'd be the guy that I would say for that.
What about
For
on offense? Yeah.
for offense,
Who
boy,
made some money?
yeah, I think there's a lot of good options that I mentioned. Trying to think of somebody I maybe didn't get a chance to talk about yet. Um,
Or just a guy
yeah,
who just really felt like he kind of shot up the draft boards essentially after this week.
yeah. I think if I would have to pick anyone, just kind of off the top of my head, it would be Jeremy Ruckert, the tight end from Ohio State. Like I said, he just didn't get the chance at Ohio State to show what he can be, what he can do, and I think he's uh, probably going to go in the top 75 picks now. Maybe
Okay.
maybe a little later in the third round, but he's a guy who I think people just didn't know what he was coming into this week, and he can block. He can, he's not the fastest tight end on the field, and he's not you're not expecting Jeremy Kelsey or George Kittle, but again, I think Dalton Schultz, he's a guy who can hit the seam. He's always seems to be around the end zone, always making big plays in the red zone. And I think he's a guy who is never going to be a elite tight end, but a good long-term starting tight end.
Okay. Well, one of the good things about On the Clock, our mock draft simulator, is you can hear these names, you can draft them, you can, if you're using one of the Fanspeak big boards, you can click view stats and get more information about these players. On the Clock is a great way to learn about these prospects. So, kind of before we close, Steve, tell us kind of when you created On the Clock back all the way back in 2013. I just pointed out some of the benefits, but I know there's also a lot of other good benefits to just see how different scenarios play out. So speak to that a little bit more about just the benefits of On the Clock and how you can draft these players and see different scenarios.
Yeah, I think that's one of the key things for me, the way I envision on the clock. And we as we get closer to the draft, we tighten up various formulas and ensure
Sure.
guys aren't falling. This year, it's tougher because where do these quarterbacks go? It's
Mm-hmm.
not as easy
It's
as
not
a
as
lot of
locked as it was
years.
last
So.
year or a few
Um,
last year's. Yeah.
but what I like about it is it creates plausible scenarios. Are
Right.
they? Is it going to be the most likely scenario every time? This is not. There's a predictive aspect, but it's not trying to produce the most accurate draft every time. And the reason for that is because that's not what we see on draft night either. I
Right.
mean, we have teams every year who throw curveballs every single year, and that changes things. And
Right.
there's sometimes there's a good rhyme and reason why that happens. That teams know an issue with a player, medical or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
and they slide. Or yeah, some of these positions, it can be, if a certain group of teams pass on you, you might have to wait almost another round until the next group of interested teams are going to be there. You know, like for instance, we just talked about how good and strong this defensive line group is. Well, there's a lot of teams who have are pretty set in that area
Mm-hmm.
and are not going to pick one in the first round. And so if Jermaine Johnson, who I mentioned from Florida State, he's a guy who could, if he continues his progress, he could get to be a top 15 type prospect. But here's the issue with that. We know the top couple picks are likely pass rushers, Thibodeau and Hutchinson, guys like that. Um, and Drake Jack. There's a few others who could go in the top 15. So after those teams have picked, then you have the other teams. A team like Washington's not going to pick a pass rusher.
Right.
A team like Philly, who's got multiple picks in the teams, probably isn't going pass rusher. So maybe they just feel he ends up being the best value, but it could be a guy like that ends up sliding to the very end of the first, even though he's on a lot of people's big boards as the 15th player. Just a need standpoint, and a
But
positional value. So
sorry.
so the idea is to create these different plausible scenarios. There
Right.
will be times a guy like that gets taken in the top 15, but there will be other times where he slides to 31,
Right.
32, something like that. So it's that type of thing, to create various plausible scenarios so you can see, well, what happens if this occurs, if there is a run on three quarterbacks going in the top 15 picks.
Yeah. What
What
does
does
that do
that
to the
what
other
does that do to
positions?
the
Yeah.
other positions? What happens if more receivers get taken in the first round? That changes things. We saw that a couple of years ago when there was a big run on receivers, and guys like uh, you know Ayuk and Justin Jefferson. I mean, they were sitting there, and then you had the next group of guys like T. Higgins and Michael Pittman. They didn't go until the second round, even though like you could obviously. I mean, if you redid the draft, there's plenty of teams at the back of the first round who would take those guys, but they just didn't feel the need. Um,
Green Bay Packers would probably be
Packers being one of them. I mean, Patriots are another one. Like, I mean,
right.
who are the Patriots receivers right now? So, I mean, even a team like Kansas City, like, who do they have opposite Tyreek Hill? So, yeah, you can just go down a list of various situations. So the idea is to create various plausible scenarios and, to learn about players, to just get an idea of, oh, what happens here if this happens, type of thing. And we do try and have different big boards, and you can do customized big boards, so you can try and force different things, or maybe like one big board over another, and you can kind of focus on that. So yeah, the idea is to have different options, because I mean, teams have to be prepared. Guys slide all the time, so
Right. Well, that's what we always say is it's creating plausible scenarios, and there's 32 big boards draft night, draft weekend, and that's why we try to get as many good big boards as possible to kind of replicate that there's, hopefully by the time April rolls around, we will have close to 32 big boards, and so that really is emulating the draft. And while a person may not feel this guy, we always get the no way in hell will this guy fall past 10
yeah.
or 20. but it does. It happens every single year.
Oh
There's
yeah.
always the guy that falls out of the top five, the top 10, the first round, and it surprises people. But it's because that there's 32 big boards, and the reason, and that's why we want to have, and I think that's what sets ourselves apart as a mock draft simulator is to have all those different big boards, and that way, it's showing like a realistic scenario of the draft and showing different plausible scenarios. So.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was Steve's brainchild in 2013. So be sure to check out On the Clock Mock Draft Simulator. You can run it for free, or you can upgrade to a premium subscription. You can even upgrade to Ultimate GM, which allows you to do On the Clock Premium, simulate the 2022 NFL draft, or you can simulate the entire offseason and run through free agency all the way through the draft. And Ultimate GM allows you to do it with absolutely no ads, which is nice. So keep that in mind. So with that, Steve, any closing thoughts before we get out of here for our very first On the Clock with Steve Shoup?
No, just excited to keep talking draft, talking football.
I know it's draft season, so we're going to be back weekly with a weekly draft show, and we'll probably have different topics. Obviously, Senior Bowl was the one we wanted to kick off with, and I promise future weeks my dog won't be sitting on top of me snoring. But we're going to come back each week with different draft topics, and but before you get out of here, please be sure to like this episode and subscribe to the Fanspeak Network. We're just starting in it. We want this to grow. So subscribe and tell a friend who loves football or loves the NFL draft. So with that, we really appreciate you joining us, and be sure to tune in next week for our next episode of On the Clock with Steve Shoup.